Edith and I had a day in New York City. We had one day to spend together. And we wondered, well, what should we do? We had already seen a lot of the sights of New York. So we thought, what are we going to do this day? Well, she and I decided that we'd like to see the Arthur Godfrey show. Arthur Godfrey show was very popular in those days. This was a long time ago. And well, that's when your father graduated from West Point, that's when it was. And so we decided we'd like to see the Arthur Godfrey show. So we went down to the desk of the hotel and asked for tickets to go in to watch the broadcast of Arthur Godfrey show. Oh, those people told me, you'll never see the Arthur Godfrey show. The tickets were given away a long time ago, and people line up for a block down there to get in to watch the broadcast of that Arthur Godfrey show. So you'll never get to see it. Well, it wasn't very far from the hotel to where they were putting on the Arthur Godfrey show. So Edith and I, we decided we would just walk down there and have a look around and see how crowded it was. Sure enough, when we got there was a block long of people all lined up to see the show. Well, we said we'll go down to the entrance to the theater and look around at the big billboards, you know, that they have in there. So we went down and there was no one in there around the big billboard. They were all in line to get into that place. And so we were walking around there all by ourselves, just looking at these beautiful billboards telling them about the show. And a man came out of the door. He came out of the theater and came out of there. Well, Edith drummed up a conversation with him. You know, she was real good at that. And she told him that we were from Arizona, and I could hear her telling him all about this Arizona and what we did out here and how it was, and that we only had one day in New York City, and our desire was to see the Arthur Godfrey show, blah, blah. Well, this man began to talk to her, and they had quite a little conversation there. And I thought, well, pretty soon, you know, what this man said, I guess he liked Edith real well, and he got interested in Arizona and interested in us. And pretty soon he said, why don't you girls come on in? He said, why don't you girls come on in? He said, I'll just take you on in. And sure, we went on in. Well, you know what he did? He took us right down to the stage, and there was Arthur Godfrey and all these stars getting ready, these people getting ready to put on their show, you know, and Arthur Godfrey was giving them instruction and everything. Well, he took us down to the front of the stage, and he called Arthur Godfrey over and introduced Arthur Godfrey to us, and there we sit by the stage, and about that time, and then he said, well, okay, he said, girls, he said, you have a nice time today, and he told us goodbye and left and went out. He must have been the boss of the whole thing, because otherwise, right at that time, we saw him bringing trays out on the stage, and these trays had all kinds of good drinks. We could see they had sandwiches and donuts and everything on these trays that they were bringing out. And Mr. Godfrey said to us, he said, we're just getting ready to have a break before our show. We're ready to put on our show now, and we're going to have a little break, and we're going to have some food. Would you like to come up and join us? Wow. Can you imagine that?
Incredible.
And so, sure, of course, we hadn't eaten a thing yet all day, and of course we went up and joined them, and they were so friendly to us. It was a happy time. Wow. It was a real happy time, because they seemed to enjoy us, and we enjoyed them, of course, and we enjoyed the food, and we enjoyed meeting Arthur Godfrey, and so after we had, oh gosh, we ate sandwiches, and we had a good time up there. Well, anyway, a little bell rang, and they knew that the break was over, and you had to get ready for the show. Well, he told us to just go down and have a seat right on that front row. So we did. Down there we had a seat on the front row. We watched the beautiful show, and we had a wonderful time.
Fabulous.
And when we got back to the hotel, oh, you kids, you didn't get to see the Arthur Godfrey show, did you? I said, we bragged, you know, we not only saw the Arthur Godfrey show, we had breakfast with Arthur Godfrey. That was Edith and I. And we watched several other shows that same day. So we had a real good time.
Amazing.
That was mine and Edith's day in New York City. while we were together, just the two of us.
Now,
Everybody else had something to do that day.
I was going to say, how did you end up with just you two alone for a day in New York?
That was our day. It was our last day in New York because they left the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was going to I had my mother and my daughter with me, my little daughter, 16-year-old daughter. And my mother was sort of handicapped. I had to kind of help her. And they were with me. And we were going to go on to Washington, D.C. But all the rest of them, Edith and everybody left the next day. But we'd had several days before that, of course, to see the sights and everything. When I was left alone with my mother and my daughter, we were going to go to see Washington, D.C. because I'd never seen it. And my mother called me to her and she said, "Alice, I don't feel well. I don't have a good feeling about going to Washington, D.C. Let's just go straight home." And I said, "Mother, if you feel like that, we won't go to Washington. We'll go straight home." So we caught a plane and came straight home. Later, when I visited Washington, D.C., years later, I visited Washington, D.C. with the adult group. I was so thankful that I didn't take my little daughter and my handicapped mother to that city. It was not a safe city to go like that. And because when we did visit it, they told us, "Don't go around and out in this town except you go 2 by 2. Always don't go alone." And they even told us not to walk against the buildings, to walk out towards the street would be really safer for us if we were women and we were alone. But said, "Don't go alone, always go with 2. So we found out that Washington, D.C. was not as safe a city as maybe New York or some other place. And I was happy that we came straight home. But we had a wonderful time going to see Jill graduate from West Point. But that was one of the highlights.
Wow. Were you able to go on any other trips with Gus and Edith? I know you went camping quite a bit with them.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we went. We went camping. We visited in their home an awful lot.
Good.
We sure loved Gus and Edith, I'll tell you. And Edith just continued on after Gus was gone. She'd invite us to her home all the time. She never let it leave us alone on holidays. She always invited my son and me to come there to be with them. She was a precious person. I loved her very much.
Yeah, everyone that we talked to yesterday said that, they just went to her home. Even people like the Whites, who lived down the street from them, who were friends with Gerald and Colleen.
Oh, yeah.
Even after they moved out, they would still go down and see Edith because she would always have cookies or pies. And
she was a wonderful little host. She was so sweet and good.
When we would visit her, there always people would be knocking on the back door, the front door, sometimes both doors. People would be knocking at the same time, dropping in to say hi. She was a precious person.
Yep.
I loved Edith.
Yep.
And of course, I loved my brother Gus.
Oh yeah.
Gus was a special person. So sweet and good and kind. I never cross or nothing. He was just so good. I had close companionship with my brother. Then when he got acquainted with Edith and was courting her, I just came home from teaching. I just came to teach and to come home to teach in the school there. And I bought me a new Chevy car. And Gus would borrow that sometimes to go see Edith. We loved having that car. So when he was courting Edith, I had my first year of teaching at Alma School.
That was when you had your brother in your class. Were you teaching your brother in the same class?
My brother Ernest. This is my brother Gus. We all lived together in a big farmhouse there. And yes, I taught my brother in school. And I had to have my tonsils out, and I didn't get to go to school to take charge of my class right in the beginning of school. I had to have about 2 weeks before I went, and they had to have a substitute teacher this time. My brother Ernest, well, he was in 6th grade, and he would come home and tell me how mean those kids were. He was scared. Every night he'd come and tell me how mean they were, and he was scared to death for me to be their teacher. It was 6th grade, and I got kind of worried too to go there. Well, when I went to teach that first day, coming home, we walked to school because it was just a little ways from our house, and we walked to school. And coming home after school, when I went that first day to teach, I thought, I don't know what my brother's going to think of me as his teacher. You know, he's always thought of me just Alice around the house. But I was walking home. Ernest run and caught up with me and took my hand and said, Alice, he said, you walked in there like a real teacher. Oh, he said, he just smiled and he said, Alice, you walked in there like a real teacher. And he ran on off with his friends. And I thought, that's the best compliment I ever had.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful compliment, you know,
Yeah.
for my brother to not be afraid anymore. And he ran up and he said, Alice, you walked, that's what he said to me. You walked in there like a real teacher. Wasn't that nice?
Yep.
He wasn't afraid anymore, neither was I. I had no trouble with those kids. They were not mean to me. I had no trouble with those boys. I never did have any discipline problems, but I wouldn't say that I could go and teach nowadays and not have discipline problems, because they have terrible problems in the schools today.
Oh yeah, it's a little different nowadays.
It's very much different. But my students always did respect me, and I respected them, and I always had a happy time with my teaching.
After that, that's when you moved down more toward the border, right? Where you had a...
This was after I had already been to
After
the
you had
border.
been.
I had already been teaching in the border and came home to stay, to come home to teach. Because, well, down there I was living with my sister and her husband, and he was transferred.
Oh, I see.
And so I didn't want to go to that little town without them, without being with them.
Down there you were teaching K through 12, or?
In Sassabee, where I first went after I graduated, it was a little Mexican town on the border, and I had all the mixture of children. I had all 8 grades in one room.
8 grades.
It was a one-room school. Now that's an experience.
Yeah.
But I loved it. We had a nice time down there.
You had to learn a little Spanish?
I learned some Spanish down there.
Yeah.
I regret that I didn't learn it completely. I should have gotten me a tutor and really learned the language instead of just picking up what I could.
Wow.